Thank you for listening to the Guys Who Do Stuff podcast. Visit guyswhodostuff.com. You probably shouldn't Google that.
All right. Well, welcome to the Guys Who Do Stuff podcast. I'm Joe.
And I'm Josh.
And we help you get unstuck, tell a better story, and have a good answer to the question, what are you doing today? And today on the episode, we have Ryan Vett. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Thanks for having me, not us.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do look like two people over there. No, you look like Jimmy Fallon. Has anybody told you that?
I heard that this morning, believe it or not.
Yeah, you'll hear it again in this interview, I'm sure.
Okay.
So we're here with Jimmy Fallon, and we're very excited. So Ryan and I know each other. I got the pleasure of working with your dad, and I did a little bit of research. So just since you may not know Ryan Vett at this point in your life, let me tell you a little bit about him. He's a marketing consultant, a business consultant, speaker and writer, dental consultant, podcasting. He wrote a book about a devotional about Christians dating.
That's correct.
That was your first book, right?
It was my second, actually.
That was your second book.
It was.
So your first book was the one about the trip to China?
It was, yes.
Cool.
Man.
So you are a guy who gets stuff done.
Yeah.
That's probably just the tip of the iceberg. That sounds like what you were up to probably last time you updated your website, which was who knows how long ago.
It's been a little while.
So tell us a little bit about what you got going on right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had the opportunity to be in the startup world for the last 5 years or so, and it's been great being with different companies in the Triangle area that have really made an impact on their particular fields. And in doing that, it reignited my passion for entrepreneurship. In the midst of all of that, I opened 2 coffee shops and wine bars. They're called the Oak House. Both of them have the same name. One in Elon, across from the university there where I went to school, and one that just opened in downtown Durham. So check it out. And so I've been doing that too. But after spending some time and just trying to figure out what can I do to make a positive impact, one of my goals in life, I was at a conference when I was 18, and they said, what is like your motto, your life motto? And I tried to think about that. And my motto that I came up with then is to inspire others towards a positive change. And I felt that what I was doing in what you call corporate America or in a day job wasn't necessarily inspiring others towards a positive change. Sure, I can inspire the team that reported to me and things like that. But I really wanted to get back to the roots and look for an opportunity to innovate. And around that time, my wife, Jessica, who is a dentist, came to me, and she was just having some frustrations with hiring people. And hiring good quality people, hiring them when needed and not having to wait a long time. And so I started to do what any good husband does. Instead of listening, I tried to fix her problem.
Solve. Yeah,
yep, exactly.
Wives always appreciate that.
Oh, they do. and so I went into problem solving mode and started investigating and researching and realizing that there was nothing in the healthcare space that could provide on-demand temporary workers. About 10% of the healthcare workforce is temporary workers. And there's
in
no
the healthcare space, is that a little unique in that you're pretty qualified? Like you're qualified or you're not.
Exactly. So you do have to have licenses, and every state's different, and every position is different. And some states have positions that aren't in other states. I mean, it's very complex. And so hiring those people can be really difficult, and no one's really made a scalable platform because of some of those difficulties. And a lot of people have tried to innovate in the space, but they take what the traditional model of staffing is and just digitize exactly what's been done, which is good. It's a step forward, but that's not innovating. That's just doing something digitally. And so I tried to figure out, how can we streamline some of those approval processes? How can we streamline license verification? And so essentially created a new company that just launched yesterday, and that's called Boon. And it is Uber meets eHarmony meets healthcare staffing. It's temporary providers on demand. And you can, not only are we just putting someone in your office, but we're helping someone connect based on their skill sets, based on if they know a certain EMR system, which is the system that manages patient records. We want to make sure when they walk into the office, they know what they're doing. So we help make all of that happen.
So this would be for dental, medical, veterinary professionals.
You got it. So we're launching into dental first for a number of reasons. That's where my sweet spot is. That's where my wife is, obviously. And I know dental pretty well. And there's a lot of opportunity there, and there hasn't been a whole ton of innovation in dental in particular. And then we're moving into veterinary and medical within the next year. Yeah.
So why Boon? B-O-O-N. What does that Boon mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. And Boon, I'm really excited about that. So I was actually on a podcast recently, and someone asked me about branding. We were having this big conversation about how do you name a company and what goes into a name of a company.
Right.
And you look at Apple, and that just came around because Steve Jobs was on literally an apple and fruit diet and had just come out of an orchard, and he thought it was non-intimidating, was his exact words. At least according.
I love one of the biggest brands. He's like, and I was eating an apple and I thought, this isn't scary. Let's go with this.
Exactly. And then you look at Walt Disney, and that's somebody's name. And
I want to know what fruit he thought was intimidating. He was like, it was between apple or that intimidating orange.
Maybe more of a vegetable.
All that acid. I don't know. Sorry. Keep going.
You're good. And so you look at like Walt Disney, and that's his name. And then you look at Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola, do you know how they got their name?
No idea.
The ingredients. So
cocaine.
Cocaine. And the cola nut. So that's how Coca-Cola actually got their name.
Cola nuts. Wow.
Yeah. I don't know what a cola nut is. I've had a cola nut syrup in like an Italian soda, but
I think Joe has some in his fridge out there.
No, I don't.
No cola nuts for you?
No.
Cola nuts. So that's, you look at all these different names, but to get back to your question, Joe, why did I name it Boone? So I was trying to do something that was good, trying to do something that was different. And so I tried to look up words that are translatable into a lot of languages, because that's a big issue. You don't want a name of a company,
right?
And you go to a different country.
I love the story of the Chevy Nova. Have you heard that one?
I have not.
So the Chevy Nova was a car that came out, I think it was like late 80s. I'm not a car guy. Forgive me if that's wrong. 90s. Chevy Nova. Anyways, in Spanish, it means no go, like Nova. And so they, when they tried to ship it to a Spanish speaking country, it was like they named the car the no go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
They could discount it heavily if they sell it in the market.
Yeah.
Did not know that story, but naming is important, especially when you want to scale or go across country lines or even just be relevant to different people. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do, is make an impact for all people. So boon is an old English word with Latin roots that means doing something good or beneficial.
Oh, really?
And if you look at a bunch of languages, you probably know bon, bueno, and so many different languages have this idea of good. It's about 12 languages that have almost the same word, bon or boon. So that's really, really exciting. And our tagline is practicing good, which is the idea of healthcare providers are practicing and every day that they do. And instead of practicing medicine, we want them to practice good, practice boon. So,
yeah. And your tagline is practice good. The graphics look really great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. That's really exciting, man.
Yeah,
I'm excited for you. So it's kind of like Uber meets eHarmony meets, what was the third one?
Healthcare staffing.
Healthcare staffing. I love that. I love it when people pitch movies like that. It's kind of like this movie and this movie. And then you're like, oh, I get it. It's a very efficient way to kind of sum it all up for people.
Right. I wasn't trying to redo Uber by any stretch, but it just made sense.
Right.
When I was talking to some early VCs, I was trying not to say Uber because everyone's trying to Uberize everything. And I didn't want to go down that path. And one of the guys turned to me, he's like, this is basically like Uber. I'm like, if you want to call it that. He's like, no, it's okay. This is a good take on Uber. I said, okay, then I'll take it. Thank you.
So you were mentioning earlier kind of what you felt like at the core of what you wanted to do is to inspire people towards a positive change. Yes. Do you think with this idea of boon, I was reading on some of your marketing material about how it was putting the power back in the hands of the worker or the professional. Right. And kind of historically, I read there's a blog post about the history of staffing agencies and how, well, really like a lot of things are started with the benefit of the organization in mind. And so weren't really thinking about the needs and wants of the employees or the people that would be receiving the services. And then I was thinking about this idea that you hear all the time now about how, put it in whatever context, you probably read this blog online about how millennials are willing to trade flexibility or these 5 things for more pay, etc. And I thought this could be a really good season for this, because the idea of flexibility or having a little bit more control over your schedule is such an empowering idea to millennials. And I'm just wondering, was that a little bit what was going into your thought process with this?
Yeah, it definitely has a part to do with it. And the other thing that really shocked me was when I was doing research on the market size and is this viable and is it worth pursuing and leaving a good, comfortable job to go do this? What I found was that almost 1/3 of all active dental licenses in the United States did not earn money last year.
Wow.
So dentists have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and years and years and years in school. And this is, again, just particularly dental. You're not looking at medical or veterinarian yet. And they're not using their license. Now, if you dig into that number, a lot of it has to do with retired dentists, but a lot of it has to do with people working overseas too that might not have earned money in the US. But still, if you have almost 1/3 of your population that's not using their license, that should raise a red flag as to why that is. And the root causes are retirement, burnout, which is a huge issue. If you're looking about correcting a millimeter with a slightly different shade of white every single day, I mean, that gets pretty monotonous and people don't like coming to you. And so how can you give someone that flexibility? And the other part is the retired people. So they golf for 1 or 2 years and they love their retirement. Then they're like, oh, this isn't all I thought it was chalked up to be. And, a lot of dentists and medical professionals retire younger than the average working person. And so they still are very able to work and can't get a temporary job because they're older, they're retired and they're labeled as such. So we want to empower those people to have that flexible schedule and be able to take vacations when they want, not have to work these long shifts, or take vacations when the practice owner takes vacations, which is another big thing that people don't realize. In most states, not all states, but whether it's a medical practice, a veterinarian practice, a dental practice, if the doctor, the highest degreed person, is not in the building, patients cannot be brought back to the operatories to be seen. And so you can't even get your teeth cleaned. You can't get a nurse to draw your blood pressure. You can't get all these different things unless that doctor is in the room. And so there's a lot of opportunities to have someone on demand in case someone gets sick. I mean, if you have the whole practice and thousands of dollars of production a day resting on one single person, and that person can't be there, that's pretty.
Do you know what majority of practices are like single doctor practices? Is that the majority?
More and more, it's not the majority, which is another cause for a lot of the burnout or people leaving, especially in the non-doctor level. So some of the support roles, a lot of people are leaving those positions because of the consolidation of healthcare, both with medical and dental practices. So big organizations and health systems are buying up these practices, and they're maybe not making pay as great or making work longer or longer weeks, whatever it might be. And so it becomes a bit more difficult. So I would say originally, like 3/4 were all single practitioner, but now you're seeing that drastically shrink.
You were mentioning before about work-life balance, kind of switching gears here a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've started a lot of stuff.
Yes.
What kind of tips and tricks have you learned about work-life balance?
Yeah, I think that's really something that I've learned a lot about recently, and not always the easiest way.
The way you said learned made me think you made a lot of mistakes in this area.
Absolutely.
I love the definition of expert as the person who's tried everything that's wrong until all that's left is right.
I'm definitely not an expert yet.
You're on your way.
That's good.
If I was an expert, I'd stop running into some of these lessons that I'm learning. Work-life balance is really important. I think we often chase after success, which is easy to do because it's the world standard of what they say success should look like. But at the end of the day, we're not chasing significance. And really, if we pursue significance over chasing success, our life will be so much more fulfilled. It will be just so much more well-rounded, because at the end of the day, you can have whatever clothes you want. You can have whatever car you want. You can have whatever house you want.
Right. And
all of that, your car is going to go out of date with the next year's model. Your clothes are going to not fit someday. And your house is going to have repairs that you always have to do. And you're always going to have, you can't take it with you. But the question is, what are you investing in? Are you investing in the people that both your clients, your team members, and all of that? And are people better because they've worked with your product or service, having touched it after touching it, or are they the same? And that's really what I'm trying to do with Boone. Is I want every single team member that comes on board to be better having worked at Boone, even if it doesn't work out. And so unfortunately, we've already had to let some people go or part ways with different people. But at the end of it, I want them to always be able to call me back. And if they ever need anything, and just have that relationship, because we want them to be better having met us than have it before. And I think if you understand that and stop chasing success and invest in people, the success from a worldly standpoint almost always comes.
Yeah, I like that. I think Josh and I were just talking not too long ago about like success. The problem with success is we never define it. So It's always like, we're not there. It's always like, who's Rockefeller? Is like, how much money is enough? More.
Right.
A little bit more.
Right.
And if you never define, I like your definition of it, because I think significance is actually a definition of it. Like, I'm going to define success as this. I'm going to be investing in people. I'm going to put relationships first. And I think you've offered a good framework for a definition of something that a lot of people, I think we were just talking about this in the last episode with Londi as well. Like the notion of, it's very common practice to just be like, don't think about that. That's a retirement thought. You don't want to worry about like what success looks like or what you want to do later. Like you just got to keep working, man.
Right.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about maybe when you feel like some of that stuff got out of whack for you. What do you notice in your life when you're like what are some of the gauges that go off in your mind when you notice work-life balance is off?
Yeah, I think that's it. This is where I'm not an expert. If I knew, then I would stop running into these problems. They're out of whack when I have to sit down and tell my wife, I'm sorry for whatever that is.
I was going to say that's mine too.
But that's after the fact.
When apologies need to be issued.
Right, yeah. Right. I think really having priorities in your life will always be a good barometer to see whether or not you're just doing life the way you plan to do life. So in my life, I've written it down, and most people haven't ever written down their priorities in life, which is really fascinating. And they're like, no, I have priorities. It's like, what are they? And they're like, well, it's this. And is that today's priority, or is that your life's priority? And so for me, it's always God first, and then it's family, and then it's friends, and it's business. And whenever any one of those shuffle around, the whole tower just starts to tip and go back and forth. And I think that's really a challenging thing to keep in mind. But if you write down your priorities and you stick to that, that's a good barometer to keep you at least somewhat on track. How do
you gauge that? Because I think I share similar priorities as well. And I know that early on, I used to probably define it incorrectly because I would put like time association. So I'd think like, if this is the most important priority, then this is where I spend the most amount of time. So like I would also put God first. So I would think, all right, I should be spending the most amount of time with God. And in reality, I spend like a half an hour in the morning and then try to remain in a state of relationship with him. But it's not like I'm just like in a Zen state with my fingers in the little Om shape and I'm like legs crossed and speak to me, God, all day long. We got other stuff going on. What kind of priority do you put time in this?
I mean, I think time is really important, but I think when you're going through and trying to analyze your priorities and you're comparing two good things, and that's the hardest thing that we face every single day, especially when you're presented with an opportunity to do a lot of good things. Yeah. It's like, okay, you've got two good things. Which one do I choose?
Everything on your list would be noble. Right. Like these 4 priorities, none of them are bad things.
Exactly. And it's how do you choose? And I think what it comes down to is not necessarily time, but is doing something for my family taking the place of doing something for God, or is doing something for business taking time from doing something for my friends? So you're always going to spend more time at work than you're going to spend probably at home, unless at least waking hours, unless you sleep at work, and then you must be a mattress tester or something. But other than that, most of your waking hours are spent at work. Does that mean work is a higher priority than your family? Probably not, because you're earning for your family and you can glorify God in your work. So I would say no. But the question is, at what point does that cross the line? So does your work allow you? I don't travel on Sundays, which is really, really hard. I try to miss no more than 2 Sundays a year at church. Is that because I think going to church is the right answer and you have to do that? No, but it's a priority that my wife and I have set because we have the opportunity to travel to some cool places and go on some cool trips. I have the opportunity to go travel and speak probably almost every weekend if I wanted to. But the reality is for us, we said, no, this is a priority, not because it's a number that we have to hit or not because God wants us to be there, but because sometimes you can say no to something good to do something better. And when that gets out of whack, it just really changes the way in which your whole life feels.
I think that's a really important point. I think a lot of people put priorities in this mindset of like, it's all about what you say yes to, but I think it's almost equally or maybe a little bit more about what you say no to. Because you're creating space for the things that you find to be important. Otherwise, if you say yes to everything, you're living reactionary, which is like somebody with no priorities.
Right. Like
whatever happens today is what happens. We'll see.
Yeah.
But that's not a very structured, or it doesn't feel like you're making choices in that regard. You're just kind of running through stuff.
Right. Yeah. I think it's Stephen Covey, and it might be someone else, but I think it's Stephen Covey that has the rocks analysis. And he says, hey, I've got this box of rocks and I can pour it into this jar. And if I pour the big rocks first and then the pebbles next and then the sand and then the water, it's all going to fit. Yeah. But if I do it out of order, it never fits. And you can go do that at home. It's a profound experiment because you really think about, okay, if I put these big rocks first and everything I do, it doesn't mean that they're taking up the most space. And that's the really fascinating thing. There's actually more sand and water in the jar at the end of it. So it's not the thing that's taking up the most space, but it's the thing that's most important. Because if you put that on last, it's never going to fit.
So how do you think you got to your why? You said that early on, you said 18 at a conference, you landed on this to inspire others to a positive change. And what I like about that is I think a lot of times people, especially Christians, because I know you grew up in the church, they think of calling as a career path. Like they think of calling as, it was kind of defined in my experience growing up as a calling in the church world was like called to what? Called to be pastor, called to be senior pastor, which was it. It's a job. And I like your definition of what you felt like you were called into, because it's actually a statement of the kind of activities that you should be doing.
Right.
That, and I find that fascinating the older I get, because I keep being reminded, like when I went to school, when I was 18 and when we were all younger, we had no idea what we wanted to do.
Right.
And then, you know, I turned 30, which was like 8 years ago. So I don't know why I'm being so generous with myself, but that line just keeps pushing. Like I used to think like my brain didn't turn on until I'm 30. And then I'm like, well, now I don't even know if I learn how to think until I'm closer to 40. And I wonder if that's just going to keep happening, you know, as you get older and older. So how did you end up? Tell me about that conference. Like, how did you end up with that? And I find it really fascinating because mine is very similar.
Interesting. Yeah. Great minds think alike. I would say I landed on that because I wanted to be a leader. That was kind of my goal. And I didn't know what a leader looked like. And I felt that was a good definition of a leader. If you look at a leader, it's not someone that has a bunch of followers, which I think is what we get mistaken with a lot. But it's really someone that can provoke or evoke change in the life of another individual. Mm-hmm. And so even if you change one person's life, you've actually been a leader. And I think people fail to realize that. And so they try to set these lofty goals, and in pursuing huge leadership opportunities, they leave a bunch of people in their wake. Yeah. And I think that's something that people don't often look at. So I picked that basically as a definition of leadership that I could kind of govern my life by. And it goes back to, you know, my faith and basic biblical roots. And if you look at what Jesus called us to do, it's go making disciples of all nations. Mm-hmm. And that's inspiring others towards absolutely the best change that they could ever make.
Yeah. So mine, I don't know how I landed on this, but it started when I was writing a blog. So that wasn't as young as you, but I kind of went through this path where I had this misunderstanding that calling was job title for a long time. And then finally came to this realization later in life. And so when I started writing this blog called Marketing Jesus, that doesn't exist anymore. But the tagline was kind of like, I went through a similar process. Like, what is it that I actually really want to do? And it was inspire creatives to leverage their time, talent, technology to tell a better story. And, which is essentially more words of what you're saying. Like, yep. And I think as I'm growing older now, like I used to think creative meant like maybe somebody in the creative discipline, but we're all creative. We're created in the image of a creative God. And so business owners and the people that I'm working with now are actually very creative people. And so maybe that word's a little bit extra right now, but I know for me, that was a big turning point, realizing, and I know for when I had to learn it, it was like, I was looking back at the time I was a youth pastor. And I was looking back over what I would put in the category of success. And in my mind, it was like the lives that I was able to impact. And so it boiled down to a list of names like this guy, this kid, this girl. And then realizing that my job title had absolutely nothing to do with that. Right. Like I could have made all those differences. I could have been there. I could have showed up. I could have done the things that made the difference in their life. And that didn't need to be my job title. In fact, some of the harder kids, like at the time there were emos. I don't know if those exist anymore, but at the time that this story was going on, I don't know if you remember that, but it's like dashboard confessionals. You're, kind of just sad about stuff. And those particular types of kids, I remember saying like, no, just encouraging things like, got a plan for your life. You're a really smart person, etc. And it was like, no, you have to say that you're my youth pastor. It's like, it didn't even matter. Right. It's like, that's just what you say because that's why my parents pay you. And at some point, so the job was actually made tougher by the title. Yeah. And I think that's a very interesting point for people to think about. Like, I believe we have so much of our identity wrapped up in our job title. Yeah. And what that does is we're limiting our perception of how big our story can be, because it's not just what you can do in this spot. Right. It's actually what you can do, like what you were wired for, what you were made to do. Yeah. And we love talking about like people's whys on the podcast.
Yeah. I didn't grow up in the church and I didn't grow up in a church family, but we went to church. and I was baptized in a baby pool in a parking lot.
Nice.
And then I did my altar call at a predominantly large African-American church in Atlanta, Georgia at Creflo Dollar, on stage with Creflo Dollar, which was really a great experience. But for me, the turning point, like at first it was like the whole calling thing was like, yeah, where do you fit in the church? And I'm like, I don't really fit in the church, I don't think. But I read this book called Roaring Lambs, which was interesting. You guys heard of it?
No.
Roaring Lambs. So the pastor who baptized me in the
I
baby
just hear
pool,
a screaming goat when you say that.
Roaring lamb. Oh yeah, right. Well, it talks about the lion side of the lamb, right? And the lion, but it just was encouraging people not to just think about it in terms of being a pastor or an evangelist or whatever, but think about it in terms of we need salt in the world. Go back to Hollywood, go back to this place, be in this place. And that spoke to me, like gave me some opening with possibilities. Yeah, just to contribute to that little piece there.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want to go back to talking about the Oak Room, right? Like what got
the Oak House?
The Oak House. Yeah, that's what I
whole
meant.
house,
Edit
not just
that
a
out.
room.
It's not just a room in the house. It's the whole place.
Does it have to do with an oak tree?
It does, actually.
Interesting.
Going back to names, what's in a name?
Yeah.
Can I
go
derail
ahead.
for a minute? So the Oak house comes from Elon, which in Hebrew means oak. And our first venture is literally across the street from Elon University. And so next to us, to our, if you're, depending on how you're looking at it, to the right side is Acorn. To the left side is the Root. And so we're the Oak House. and so
That's funny.
That's kind of where we got our name. And we do have a nice red oak bar and things like that, and nice oak tables. But the new location, we were looking to rebrand, and we decided that we really had a lot of brand equity and people loved kind of what we offered. It's very different. It's coffee. It's a beverage lounge, coffee, beer, wine, and whiskey. We're not going to make cocktails. We're not going to do blended drinks. So you can't get your Frappuccino. You can get an iced coffee. But we're the experts at pouring. And when we pour, we're going to give you an experience. We're going to give you an education. And we're going to do it in an environment that's just warm and comfortable, so that no matter who you are, whether you drink, you don't drink, whether you hate coffee, love coffee, whether you want tea or just a craft soda, we have something for you. And it's just an environment for everybody.
So do you have like a time of day where it like turns from like a coffee shop to like a bar?
We don't. No. So it's a very fluid environment, and there are people who will start with an Irish coffee.
Nice.
Yeah. But you don't pour, right? So they got to order one of each and make their own.
So, well, you can,
Yeah. What's up
we
with that?
weren't stir or mix it. We will give them, we'll pour both into a cup, because even when you pour a latte, you're still pouring, espresso on milk on top of espresso. And
you know what I find to be a very humorous thing, and I see it quite regularly. Somebody will stop in the Starbucks and they'll order a macchiato, and the person pouring will go through the work and effort of making this mixed drink where the heavier stuff goes to the bottom, and then the person grabs the straw and they're like,
stirs it. Yep.
It's like,
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I want to protest that.
you kind of just feel bad for the person who made it. They're like, well, I could have done that. It's like the way I feel when I ask my daughters to help get their other daughter, and they're just like, like I could have done that. You know, I was actually meaning you should go do the thing.
So when you do coffees, do you do the pours, the drip pours?
We do have pour overs.
I love that pour over.
And we're looking at a couple other interesting, more modern, trendy ways to do some coffee with.
Go to see Intelligentsia in California.
I love Intelligentsia.
Yeah, you experience there.
It's from Chicago, actually.
Is it from Chicago?
Yeah.
Sweet, man.
Yeah, it's where I'm from. So
are you deep dish or New York style pizza fan?
Deep dish.
Nice, of course.
Yeah.
You're from Chicago.
I have to be.
What was the Chicago deep dish pizza you liked?
Which brand?
Yeah.
Or which Giordano's. I'm a Giordano's guy.
Yeah, I like
through
that
and through.
too. Have you ever had that?
Never ever.
It's basically like a bread bowl. And they pour like tomatoes
So much
and
What?
cheese.
Do you eat it
and
with a spoon?
No, it somehow stays together, which is magical in itself.
No, I mean
ish.
it's a thick, probably 2-inch crust, and it's a sturdy crust.
Man.
I mean, it's very sturdy, but it's cheese, then sauce, then your toppings, then more sauce. So it ends with sauce on the top.
I used to live there. They used to have a lunch special at the time. It was like $8 for a slice of it, which was like, it's a lot of food to get a slice of this kind of pizza.
Yeah.
But it's delicious pizza.
Man,
It is the best.
So Intelligentsia started there.
Yeah.
And then migrated over to like California and other stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. California has some good coffee roasters
They
too.
do.
There's a lot of good coffee roasters on the West Coast.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. My brother and I, several years ago, well, it was almost a decade ago now, but I'll say several years ago because it feels like yesterday.
Yeah.
We started in Seattle and went all the way down to San Diego. And we did coffee tastings like the whole way. And it was just some really, really cool places over there.
We ought to connect you with a former guest of ours, David Morgan. So I went to Africa with David and his wife, Bethany, for their nonprofit Love Abounds.
Okay.
And
great.
they're exporting coffee from Zambia.
That would be great.
Yeah,
we roast coffee in our space, actually.
Do you really?
I saw your roaster.
Yeah. We partnered with Caballo Rojo, which is a woman-owned roaster. And she does just great coffee.
Wow.
But she loves to roast coffee with a story. So
yeah, I'll consider this the official introduction, David Morgan.
there you go. We got it. I'll forward it over to Gabby.
There was a coffee shop in Minneapolis where I went to school that had a roaster in there. And there's something about the atmosphere that the roaster, and it was kind of one of the first ones that I saw anyways, they put the roaster not in the back, like they put it in the front and a little rope around it. Like, this is how your coffee's made, by the way, kind of approach.
Yeah.
And it just smells so good.
Oh, there's nothing like it.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
It doesn't smell like coffee though when it's roasting. It smells like bread and then caramel. It goes through all these different cycles. So people are like, it doesn't smell like coffee, but it smells so good. It's like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like the combination of all, what a weird thing, coffee.
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know who thought to like, we know what we should do. We should roast that. Then we should grind it up. Then we should push some water through it. And that's going to be great.
Yeah.
Oh, what's crazier is it starts in cherries. So they have to get it out of the cherry.
Yeah. Like, they have to set it in a field. That? Like, just, we're going to leave it on this tarp for like a week and we'll come back and then we'll see. Like, the combination of what it must have taken. There's my dog, JPEG.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, like I mentioned on the podcast Forever Go with Maddie, that JPEG has an Instagram account that my daughter started. And if she gets to 1,000 people, then she gets to pick dinner. She had a great week last week. I think JPEG's up to like 700 followers.
Oh wow.
Which is crazy.
That's more than me. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. I instantly went through like, yeah, I'm proud of you. Also a little jealous of the dog. But yeah. So thanks for following JPEG the dog on Instagram. So the coffee shop, is that kind of knowing what I know about your story here, the gist behind it? Were you trying to create like a great third place for relationships?
That's exactly what it is. So it's an interesting story how it started. I started with my co-partner, Phil. He was the chaplain at Elon University while I was a student there, and I was an RA. So whenever, we had student issues arise and we needed that type of...
we need for this problem? Coffee. And then, what we need for this problem? Whiskey.
Wine. Yeah. Something like that. And so one day Phil and I were talking and Phil loves wine and I do too. He drinks coffee, but wasn't a huge coffee person. I said, you can't just have a wine bar across from Elon. Like, that's not going to work. And he's like, well, you can't have a coffee shop because we've got one of those. So we started talking about it. And one day in Asheville, we were at the SoCon championship when Elon was back in the Southern Conference. And we just started talking one night and we said, we're going to do it. And so I kind of partnered with him there and did some of the business side, and he does the day-to-day operations, and it went really, really well. And we said, wow, that went so well. We need to open one in Durham. He's from Durham originally. And I
saw your space. It looks like it's by the American Underground.
It's pretty much across the street. Yeah. So we're, if you drop a pin on Durham, it's pretty cool. Like if you Google Durham and the pin drops on Google Maps, move the pin and that's our building. Like we're under the pin. It's in One City Center. It's that new 27-story building that they built downtown, right in the heart. And so we're at the corner of Main and Corcoran, between B Goods and Poke Works. So it's, a block and a half from Deepak, 2 blocks from the ballpark. Oh my gosh, 2.5 blocks from
that's
Farmers
great. So
Market.
Next time I see something at Deepak, I know where I can go.
Absolutely.
Grab a beverage.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put that out. Deepak right around the corner. That is great.
Yeah. So we're super excited about it.
And that opened when?
It opened yesterday.
Awesome.
Yeah. What are people who live in Durham? They call Durhamites?
Sure.
Durmites or Durhamites?
I would say Durhamites. Durmites sound like something that
sounds like termite.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Durhamites. Durhamites are cool people, man.
Thanks.
Are you a Durhamite?
I am now, I would say.
Nice.
Yeah. My wife and I moved downtown last year.
What's your favorite part about Durham?
There's just so much going on. Good food, good drinks, a good place to hang out. You've got Deepak. We've been season members for like 5 years now.
Yeah.
The ballpark, we walk to the ballpark to catch games.
Nice.
It's almost like somebody designed the city for work-life balance. It's like there's a lot of place to work.
Yeah.
But here on the first floor, it's all about relationships. And then.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
I heard Kevin Costner's making a movie there called Bull Durham. Have you heard about this?
I think I've heard about that.
Oh, is this old news?
Yeah.
I hear they're even building a new ballpark too.
Yeah. Man.
That's funny.
I like how you can see the ball field from buildings, like from the offices, certain places, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. there's some really cool offices surrounding the ballpark. But going back to the third place question. So one of the things our goal was at Elon was, there wasn't a bar that wasn't like a bar in a college town. There wasn't a place where a professor could come get a drink with a student that was 21 if they wanted to, if they felt comfortable with that, or where they could get coffee in the morning with a class or whatever that might be. So we tried to create that third place in Elon, and the response was overwhelming. I mean, you have a lot of people that aren't from Elon coming through Elon just because of the school and college tours. And the comments we heard were, there's just nothing like this. It doesn't feel like a bar. Feels more like a lounge. It doesn't feel like a Starbucks coffee shop, but it's a place where I can work. It's a place where I can hang out with friends. It's a place where I can go on a date. It's a place where I can bring my little kids. It's a great place where I can bring my family, and everybody's comfortable.
That's an interesting thing, because I don't think that existed too long. Now, I haven't been drinking for a long time, but the idea of like, it's not like a bar, but you hear that all the time. Like, it's not like a bar. Like,
right.
Now we've got these things called pour rooms.
Right.
And like downtown Cary has some, and there's picnic tables outside. You can just go grab a beer, take your dog, hang out. There's an ice cream place next door. It's kind of like, there's this interesting idea when you're in a downtown space that you don't have to be everything. Like you can just be good at one thing, and then they can go next door and grab their thing and bring it over to your place. And everybody can kind of mix and match, which is, it's a very cool idea. I don't have anything by my house that's like walking distance that I would feel like really excited about going to, like what you're describing. I'm hopeful that they're going to take where we're by Carytown Mall right now. They've got big plans for this, apparently.
Okay. So that's the third Oak House.
Yeah.
Ooh,
maybe.
Interesting.
That would be fantastic. Because then there's a little greenway right here. You can just pop out Barnes and Noble.
And I manage a pumpkin patch right down in South Hills Mall parking lot. It's been there this will be the 5th year.
Okay.
So I'll know where to go to get my coffee and my whiskey.
Spice lattes.
Oh gosh, bring it.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that idea, man. That's, I was telling my wife, and I still haven't quite found it yet, but just the desire that I have for a third place.
Yeah.
Especially now that I'm going through this transition and I'm working from home. You guys are kind of in my home office here. I like to work outside of the office. Sometimes I have a week where I'm like, no, I just want to sit here and get stuff done. And sometimes I'm like, I just can't be in this basement again. Like I got to go somewhere and do something else. And I don't have a spot. And Laura's like, well, you should just go to a bar. And I said, yeah, I like to romanticize it. Like I'd walk in and they'd be like, Norm, my name's Joe. But
Joe.
But then I know I shouldn't spend my every night hanging out in a bar. That's not a good idea. Because a bar, like its kind of job is to drink. Like, it's like when you go to Starbucks and you don't order something, you feel bad. It's like, if I'm going to mooch off your Wi-Fi, I'm going to drink your coffee. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the cool things about what we've done. We have so many drink options. I mean, we have 16 beers on tap. Yeah. Trying to think of what the new one is. The first one's 12, the next one's 16, but we have like 30 or 40 bottle options just for beer. We've got about 5 or 6 by the glass wines and about 20 bottles or 30 bottles you can buy, and then tons of different coffee.
So you guys have kind of solved one of the problems that's an issue by offering so many different kinds of beverages that like some of the pour rooms downtown, they don't open until like 2 because who wants to go for breakfast?
Well, breakfast out.
Like breakfast. Yeah. That's interesting. That's very cool. Mm-hmm. So what have you learned from opening a restaurant type place?
That I don't ever want to open a restaurant. It's tough. It is and I don't even manage it. So I need to give my hats off to Phil, who does the day-to-day operations. And I mean, it is long hours. It is tough. Things happen, things break, and you've got to be on call all the time. It is a very, very tough business, but it's also very rewarding. And I think people don't think about that, especially in our environment. I don't know about a restaurant. I mean, I guess if you're a chef and you do a great meal, you can feel good about that, but we get to have conversations. It's a very conversational, very warm place with people. And I mean, even if you look on social media, every graduation, Elon's graduation was like 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And if you look on social media, so many people post, oh, this is my last Oak House drink. And it just was something that was their third place. And I found this out after my grandfather died many years ago. His name was Tunis, good Dutch name. But every day or most days he'd actually stop by McDonald's and get a cup of coffee at their little bar counter there and just sit there for a couple minutes before going home to kind of unpack and unwind from the day. And I don't know how long he did that or how long that was a habit of his. But he did that so that he didn't have to bring work home and he could just kind of, have an outlet there. And I found that out after the Oak House was opened. But I was like, wow, this is like the Tunis place. Like this is like a place where people can unwind, or people leaving home. Maybe if, they had a rough morning, can stop in for a coffee, just a coffee, and then go to work, or have meetings or have dates, whatever it is. And it becomes this place that's a safe environment for a whole family or an individual, and just really something different that we're trying to create. Yeah.
There are some places, and I think restaurants, pourhouses, it sounds like the way you're describing the Oak Room, can be metaphors for like a place where relationships happen. And that's kind of a really unique, exciting thing to spend your time doing.
Right.
Like you're basically creating an environment for relationships to happen. Mm-hmm. And so much about it is about the hospitality. Is the Wi-Fi free? Yeah. Is the lighting good? Is it a good place to have a conversation? The way you do the layouts and everything. It's a very exciting. It must be a rewarding way to spend your time.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's fun.
That's special.
It's very cool. So tell us a little bit more about Boon. How do people find out? How do they start using it?
Yeah. So we launched yesterday, which is super exciting. And we've already had a ton of signups. Yeah. And basically, you can go to doingboon.com, which would be doing good, essentially. So doingboon.com. And you can learn more about the platform, and you can learn more about signing up as a provider, which would be a healthcare person that wants to go do temporary work. So if you want to work, that's the other thing. If you want to work 3 hours a day and that's it, you can do that. Typical agencies require a minimum of 8 hours. So we'll give you the flexibility to work however long you can. If you have a medical condition that doesn't allow you to work for more than 4 or 5 hours, you can input that. So you can do it that way. And then if you're a practice, you can also hire on demand. And we have transparent pricing. So anyone right now, a lot of temp agencies, and not all, I don't want to generalize and put everyone in this bucket, but a lot of temp agencies charge a lot of money to have a membership with them, and then charge a placement fee, then charge a premium on the hourly rate. And so all of a sudden you're paying all of these fees just to get an employee that's there for a couple hours. And we're trying to reduce that cost.
And there's usually a lot of negotiation involved.
Yes. And so we're taking that all out. When you hit request provider, it says, hey, your provider is going to cost you $300 today for the hours you wanted to work. They'll be there within 42 minutes, just like you ordered a DoorDash or something like that.
Yeah.
And
think about the freedom that would provide. Let's say you were in a healthcare profession and you knew, man, I want to spend a month somewhere else, and I just want to Airbnb. Yep. And normally that would be vacation mode, but you could also earn while you're there, because you can just open up the Boon app and be like, all right, well, maybe I'm just going to do this for the rest of my life. Maybe I'm just going to bounce around and just enjoy it, exploring a city, pick up some work. And there's so many sites like this, but I haven't heard of one in the field you're in. Like there's a site for, there's a site called Upwork that my wife gets work from, and I just recently got some work through it, which is cool. And it basically says, a lot like what you were saying. But the guy responded to me. I was like, cool, I'll be there in 10 minutes because that's the way I roll. And he was like, oh, okay, great. Nice. Nice. But I think it's not as on demand as what you're saying.
Yeah. So I would love to talk to Upwork for a minute. So in preparation for Boon, and I actually have an article coming out on Forbes.com this week on this very topic, but basically, I spent about 3 months working on Upwork as a contractor to understand what the contractors feel. And then the entire original V1 of Boon was built on Upwork. So we used the gig economy to build a new gig economy, because I wanted to know, what are the pain points? What are people feeling? So we don't do those same things. Not that, I love Upwork. Upwork's been a lifesaver. Fiverr's been a lifesaver for startups and businesses.
Do you believe, is this one of the common things you hear as a frustration, that if you're not careful, a platform like this can cheapen the work of the entire profession?
Absolutely.
Because what happens is, like, if you're a business owner and you've dealt with competition before in your space, let's say your space got flooded, Josh, and a bunch of film professionals just came to Carrie and they're like, we're opening, so they're going to lower prices. They're going to try and outbid you. And the right thing to do would be to hold on, stay the course, because they're probably not going to be able to make it at that price point.
Right.
And so you wonder if these sites like this can't contribute to a similar thing. Like, I'll do it for, $5.
Yeah.
It's like, but everybody should be charging 65 as the fair price.
So I definitely see that being the case. And Upwork does a really good job with that, where they have, basic, intermediate, and expert, I think, are the 3 levels.
Right.
Or beginner.
So if you've never heard of Upwork, you take skill tests. So if I went on, I was like, you should join Upwork. I'm like, great. So I take some skill tests, and then it's like, great. So now they have rated my skills with this assessment. So people know what they're getting based on.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so that helps. I always kept my rate super high. As high as I would outside of Upwork. And it turned a lot of people off. They're like, oh, is that just your profile rate? I said, oh no, like, if you hire me. And so that would turn a lot of people off, but it also weeded out the people that I probably wouldn't want to work for.
Right.
So that was very helpful, but the gig economy is interesting. And I think some people say it's going to go away. I don't think it will. I do think there's a lot of turnover on the gig economy. You see people drive Uber for 3 or 4 months. You see people drive Lyft for 3 or 4 months and then they go away. But the reality is we're all in times of transition at some point in our life, and we need that extra work or that extra pay or saving for the vacation or Christmas or traveling, whatever it is.
Right.
We need to have that. So I think the gig economy is definitely here to stay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to go away either. I think it's kind of built into the way that people say this generation is. Like the freedom that it provides, the ability to kind of chart your own course in a way, because there are options now that didn't exist like when we were going to school. I didn't see the talk, but I saw a gentleman on a thumbnail of a blog that I was reading, and I just assumed, what a great talk. Because basically the slide said these companies didn't exist 10 years ago. And there were all these logos of the companies that didn't exist. Yeah. And he was at a graduation. So he was basically telling the kids, you don't know what you want to do because what you want to do doesn't exist yet. Because that's what happened to me. Like all these things that you have been part of your life for forever just weren't here a decade ago.
Yeah.
And so I think that the constant changes that we're always seeing are lending themselves to this kind of, there's so many different ways to, if you know what your why is, what you really want to do, if it's, I want to help provide value to people, I want to inspire people towards a positive change, whatever that why is, there are so many more ways that you can engineer your life.
Right.
Like if you're a fan of Tim Ferriss and you read 4 Hour Work Week, he calls it lifestyle design. Like that idea of like, so what do you actually want to do with your life? What's stopping you?
Yeah.
How do you build that path for yourself? Yeah. So yeah, I'm with you. I don't know that gig economy is going to change, and I'm excited for my daughters that they grow up in a world where that's a thing. Yeah,
they can do what they want when they want. I think one of the other companies that hasn't been out for longer than a couple of years is the idea of crowdfunding. And I'm not talking about Kickstarter or Indiegogo, but until you look at Uber. So let's talk about Uber for a minute. This is a company that just IPO'd a couple of weeks ago, and huge valuations. And if you look at like Menlo Ventures, one of their earlier, not earliest, but one of their earlier investors, they made 93 times return on their investment. So you put in $1,000 and get 93,000 out, or do that to $1 million. I mean, you're talking about some real cash, some real profit. But for the longest time, that was only allowed to, investors were only allowed to be people that were accredited, which means they have a net worth of over $1 million cash, essentially, not including their house or some other certain assets and no debt. And they also had to make a certain amount of money a year. And so very few people fell into this. So only the richest of the rich were able to invest in some of these opportunities to make, huge returns. Everyone else is making 6 to 12% in the stock market, which is good, but not these huge startup returns. Well, crowdfunding just celebrated 2 weeks ago its 3-year anniversary. And now anyone pretty much can invest in a startup company, and you don't have to be an accredited investor, and you can invest just a couple $100, and maybe that couple $100 could turn into something that turns into $10,000 over the course of a startup's life cycle. So we actually, instead of going to venture capital, in some of my relationships there to first raise for Boone, we actually launched yesterday on WeFunder. And WeFunder allows individual investors to invest in Boone because as part of practicing good, we wanted to give that fair opportunity to everyone to get a piece of the pie in a space. The healthcare staffing space in the US is 20 times larger than the ride hailing space that Uber and Lyft are both in. Yeah. So tons of potential. So we wanted to do that too.
So I'm curious, what did you learn through the launch of Boone that at a scale at which you're trying to, like, there's a difference between I'm creating a third space experience for some of my friends and buddies to I'm going after this niche in the market that is currently not met. What are some of the big lessons that you learned going through this process?
When no one has done it before, you have to make a lot of things up. Yeah. And you just have to plow forward. And I think that's been really fun to create and say, oh, we can do it this way. There is no precedent. At the same time, it's like, I have no idea if doing it that way will work because there's nothing to fall back on. So we've leaned a lot on Upwork and Uber and Lyft and Grubhub and you name the gig economy platform to see what worked, what didn't. I've done a ton of research, done a ton of user profiling, and then comparing the individuals that work on those platforms to healthcare providers, which there's not a lot of crossover there. Healthcare providers are often not driving on Lyft or Uber or delivering something on DoorDash or with Prime Now. So how can you overcome that? So it's been really fun to try and understand, but be creative and realize that we're going to make mistakes, and that's okay. And I've told all early investors, we're not going to get everything right the first time, but we have the grit to keep going. And I think grit is a huge thing that, if you haven't been in a startup before, it's hard to do that on your first startup, but being able to go through, I've been in startups that have done FDA approval and compliance and been through shortages and have been through losing some major clients and all sorts of different startups that have had different issues. And if you can persevere through that, get to your low cash point and wonder how you're going to make the next payroll, even with the Oak House in Durham, we had some unexpected financial hurdles, just because Durham is becoming such a place that everyone wants to be in. Prices were climbing as we were doing construction. Our end price for our build out was 3 times more than the original quote. Wow.
You guys are building in a phase where building is expensive right now.
Building is expensive, and it's going to take a long time, much longer than we hope to make that money back. We'll be profitable probably in about 12 months, but we were hoping for a lot faster turnaround on that.
Yeah. A lot of that stuff you just don't get to control as a business owner. But do you just throw in the towel, or do you make it work?
You make it work. Especially with the Oak House, we've got a huge lease and personal guarantees. You just keep pushing forward. And I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs, that's why not everyone's an entrepreneur. Everyone loves the idea of being an entrepreneur. It's this great idea, something exciting. But the reality is very few people have what it takes to push through no matter what. And there will be that time where you're on your knees and you're like, do I keep going or do I throw in the towel? And the companies that make it are the ones that say, I'm going to keep going. If you look at any major company, Apple was almost out of business multiple times. You see Uber in huge trouble with both legal things and with drivers getting beat or doing things they should. All these big companies have at some point been brought to their knees, and how do they come through and persevere through that?
I think, I was reading this, I was listening. I always like to say reading when I listen to audiobooks because it makes me sound more scholarly. I was listening to the audiobook Atomic Habits, and he was talking about, and so the premise of this book is it's kind of behavioral science. The small things that you do every day add up to big results over time. So nothing new, kind of an ancient idea, but really interesting science behind it. And he was talking about, or maybe I was hearing about business owners and the people that make it and the ones that don't. Maybe he wasn't. Maybe that's just the mindset I was in when I was listening to the audiobook. But he described it in such a way that I never heard in a business book before. And he said, the people that make it are the ones that can survive the boredom the longest. Mm-hmm. And what he was talking about was this notion of if you understand, it's these tiny little habits that go into success for my job. And if the premise of the book is true, which is the tiny little habits don't pay big dividends immediately. And so life isn't an up and to the right chart. Right. And so as a business owner, you're not always making 5% profit every month. Right. At the Oak Room. It's just sometimes maybe, sometimes more, but it's just not that consistent. And so the people that are successful are the ones that can put up with the boredom the longest. And I love the intention of what he's saying is, who can put in the work knowing that someday it's going to pay off, even though it's not paying off right now? Right. And it's tough. Mm-hmm. It's hard. And I believe that principle is so true. Because some people work out like that. I think I kind of work out like that. I'll work out for a solid month and be like, all right, I'm buff. Look in the mirror, not buff. This is stupid. I'm not working out so hard. I worked out way too hard this month to not change that much. But that's just not how exercising works. It's not a 1 month and you're done thing, unless you're one of the Avengers and you can pay a personal trainer. Maybe those guys can. Well, that's really awesome. So, Ryan, thank you so much for being on today's podcast. Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been fun. Yeah, you're an impressive dude. Yeah, you are. You kind of make me feel lazy a little bit. Yeah. And I'm the guy who does stuff. We're supposed to be. But that's good. That's meant as a compliment. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks for being here. Yeah, absolutely. And sharing.
We love making this stuff for you. You can help us out by subscribing wherever you get your podcasts. Get unstuck, tell a better story, and have a good answer to the question, what are you doing today?